We'll wait one more minute and then we'll kick off. Could I just do a quick check of where everybody's from? So, Leah, are you Dumfries and Galloway?
Yeah, that's right. Wallace Hall Academy in Dumfries and Galloway.
Fantastic. Great to have you with us.
Thanks.
I know that we had Lisa for a second there, but she seems to have dropped out as a teacher. So we'll wait a second, see if they can get back in.
Tom, I know that we've got about 10 people signed up. Are you wanting to wait a little longer?
Just 30 seconds. Just want to see if they get back in.
Okay.
It is irritating. It seems as if quite a few people have not been able to get in or not shown up. I did email attendees this morning. Maybe it's best we just make a start, Howard. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, well, we've got to make a start at some point, and
yeah.
I think the introduction is useful, but the vital stuff is later anyway.
Yeah, it is later anyway. Okay. Well, welcome, Leah, and anybody who's watching after, because as I say, we're recording this, we will be putting this out on our YouTube channel as well. So what we're talking about today, and thank you for registering interest in the webinar, is 1.5 Max. We've got, let in Mr. Ansbro. So just introducing the webinar today. So this is the third in a series of 3 webinars about 1.5 Max. We're recording this just for new attendees. And talking about October 2022, which is when we're going to be running the second of our 1.5 Max Summits, the first of which was in October last year. Thank you very much for giving your time at what is an incredibly busy moment in the school timetable. I know that because I'm a teacher myself. We've just started our new timetable this week, so it's been very intense. Thank you very much for joining us and for thinking about 1.5 Max. We think it's an amazing opportunity, an amazing event. We've already got a lot of interests from schools in different parts of the world. And what I'm going to do to start off is to hand over to Howard to start off by talking about some of the principles behind 1.5.
Thanks very much, Tom. I'm Howard Beck. Set Up Sustainability Partnerships, the group that is putting on 1.5 Max. I've been working with Tom and Callum McClellan as the co-organizers of Sustainability Partnership, and our core main activity now is a global summit, which we're going to talk about today. I'm just going to get the slides up. Is that visible? Tom, yeah, thank you. 1.5 max real world climate education. I think that for people who've been involved, the idea of real world climate education has the sense of encountering climate change impacts. And that's what teachers who were involved and young people who participated in the 3-day summit found, is that they're meeting with people who are already experiencing issues, whether that be in Mozambique or whether that be in Malawi or Nepal or in Scotland. We're all facing the issues, and this event is deliberately intended to bring it home and make it real. I'm going to start off by providing a bit of the context, because I think many people don't realise that Scotland does have a very important leading role when it comes to sustainability education. The fact that we might feel that it's not progressing as fast as we would like to see it progressing, that does not mean that the policies aren't in place and the commitments aren't in place from various quarters. I'll just go through some of the points regarding the context for the 1.5 max event. First of all, on the left-hand side, there's the focus on climate urgency. There's 3 elements that give us the context for 1.5 max as a focus. First of all, the first point regarding climate urgency is COP21 in the Paris Agreement set up in 2015, and the IPCC reports at that point identified 1.5 as a critical target. In 2019, a special report from the IPCC identified 1.5 degrees as being so different to 2 degrees, and it was no longer an issue whether or not the target could be less than 2 degrees. It's become absolutely apparent there's enormous difference between 1.5 degrees. Scotland set a target for ending contribution to carbon emissions by setting a target of net zero by 2045. And most recently, in last year, COP26 and the IPCC report has just strengthened the recognition of the urgency of the matter. In the context of Scotland, looking at education and youth empowerment, the policies of within Scotland on learning for sustainability provides a really strong context for active development. Every child in Scotland is entitled to sustainability education. Every teacher has a responsibility to incorporate sustainability into their teaching practice. And the whole school approach is a world-leading approach to climate education and sustainability education. And when all schools in Scotland adopt a whole school approach, the way in which schools, young people and communities are going to be responding will be enormously different. It will be world leading at that point. I've highlighted the UN Rights of the Child Convention, which was passed unanimously by the Scottish Parliament. And this is also critically important aspect of Scotland and the way that Scotland is treating sustainability education and the rights of children to direct policies and to take action and have their voice heard. And finally, under the third point there is climate justice. Scotland is leading in 2 important respects. One is setting up the Just Transition Commission, and the second is Scotland has set up a climate justice fund. It was the first country in the world to set it up, and it provides a launch of an international initiative. So I'm raising the points about Scotland's general approach to education and policy regarding climate change. We do have a basis on which to aim to provide an example. I've added in 3 points there on the right. First of all, there's a very clear commitment to 1.5 max. The education and youth empowerment, the most recent report by Professor Ken Muir, titled Putting Learners at the Centre, has strengthened sustainability and has made a commitment to the rights of the child. And thirdly, international solidarity is a key focus, and it is not separate from climate action. International solidarity and international cooperation is vital. So regarding the commitment to 1.5, the Paris Agreement committed to being well under 2 degrees, and this was signed by 192 countries and the European Union, and to pursue limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees. That was the first time it was referenced, and vitally important change. David Attenborough has made a very strong statement regarding 1.5 degrees too. Staying below 1.5 degrees is the only chance we have of avoiding these tipping points and stabilizing our world again. And then the most recent report, Jim Skay, the most senior Scottish representative on the IPCC report, has said it most clearly. It's now or never if we want to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. It's vitally important that young people have a chance to act in this kind of environment. And just bringing out a couple of the points from the Ken Muir report. First of all, here is a quote: "Fulfilling the rights of the child enshrined in law is not negotiable. All efforts by publicly funded bodies with an interest in education must be built from the basis of Article 29 on the UNCRC. I've got a brief description of Article 29 coming up. The current generation of learners see climate change as one of the most significant issues facing their future, and as such, must be recognized as a key driver influencing the future of our education system." So Ken Muir is calling for a national debate, but he has framed the debate in an important way, both in terms of rights of the child and in terms of climate change. The Article 29 is, if you haven't read this previously, it's interesting to read it. Article 29 says the child or young person's education should help their mind, body, and talents be the best they can. It should also build their respect for other people and the world around them. In particular, they should learn to respect their rights and the rights of others, their freedoms and the freedoms of others, their parents, the identity, language, and values of countries, including their own. And education should prepare children and young people for being responsible for a responsible life and a free society. It should teach them, to live in an understanding and tolerant way that is non-violent. That is non-violent and that respects the environment. The reference to environment is important. The reference to respecting others is also important. And these principles that Ken Muir put forward were put forward after we set up 1.5 max, but I hope that you see 1.5 max is very much in line with those objectives. The Assistant Director General for Education from UNESCO has pointed at the vital role of education and social transformation. Sustainability partnerships and 1.5 max are absolutely committed to building on the role of education in social transformation. We're increasingly asking if what people learn is truly relevant to their lives, if what they learn helps to ensure the survival of our planet. Education for sustainable development can provide the knowledge, awareness, and action that empower people to transform themselves and transform societies. This certainly goes way beyond just simply teaching about the climate and teaching sustainability. It's much more a whole person approach. And the model of the United Nations Education for Sustainable Development has three core elements: understand sustainability challenges and their complex interlinkages, social and emotional, build core values and attitudes for sustainability, cultivate empathy and compassion for other people and the planet, and behavioral, take practical action for sustainable transformation in the personal, societal, and political spheres. I'm going through these slides initially just to give emphasis to the 1.5 Max event, not simply focusing on the content of climate change. That is an important part of what's covered, and there's very considerable learning in that area, but it's these additional elements: the cognitive, the social and emotional, and the behavioral. International solidarity, international cooperation and solidarity underpins collaborative global initiatives required to avoid runaway climate change and environmental degradation. Increasingly, young people are expressing concern about the injustices associated with climate change. For example, Fridays for Future. And the communities most vulnerable are generally the communities least responsible for climate change. This is at the heart of 1.5 Max. And that's why we include schools from the very poorest and most climate vulnerable countries. I'm now going to hand over to Tom, and he's going to go through 1.5 Max, the ideas behind 1.5 Max, and the summit as we went through it last year.
Thank you very much, Howard. And let me just reiterate the point that you made about education for sustainable development being at the core of what we're doing here with this summit. We're trying to take it beyond just lessons on climate change that involve a certain amount of here's how it works and here are some things you can do. It's about the behavioral and it's about the social and emotional as well. What we were essentially aiming for when we went for 1.5 Max 2021 and when we set that up to be something leading up to COP26 for secondary schools to take part in is something unforgettable, an experience that would involve a lot of responding to the emotions involved in the issue. And for many young people, those are quite severe emotions, which are difficult to deal with unless you're in a group setting where you're thinking about these things together. Listening to one another, including listening to children the same age as them on the other side of the globe, which I will talk about in a moment. Talking to one another within the school setting about what they can actually do. Learning about climate change and about the inequity of the issue is certainly a major factor. Thinking about some of the solutions they might come up with and a chance to be creative in the way they communicate that are all vital as well. Let me just talk about the first 1.5 Max Summit, which was held 5th to the 7th of October 2021, so a Tuesday to a Thursday. Now, this involved 9 schools from around Scotland, and we're about to come up to the selection process for the 2022 summit as well, very, very shortly. It involves schools in 2021 from a variety of different regions. So we had interest from schools from most local authority areas in Scotland last time. And we managed to narrow it down by thinking about socioeconomic diversity and geographical diversity and prioritizing that. So making sure schools that would not ordinarily have the opportunity to do an event like this were given priority. And we're aiming for that again with this one. So looking for schools in cities, towns, rural and islands. We had all 4 schools from the Western Isles take part last time, which was a real pleasure. As well as schools from Dumfries and Galloway. We had schools in Glasgow, an ASN school, 2 ASN schools in Glasgow, one of which was a hospital education service. We had Boroughmuir High School, where I work in Edinburgh, Musselburgh Grammar School in East Lothian, as well as schools in Fife, Aberdeenshire, and then looking abroad, we had 2 schools in Mozambique, 1 in Malawi, and 1 school in Nepal, who went on to win an International Schools Award from the British Council as a result of their work with us with 1.5 max. I'm going to try and take control of this presentation. Let's see if I can do that by tapping take control. Yes, I can. Great. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what actually happens during the 1.5 max summit, which I'm sure you're wondering. So students get to know one another. This is what we call the getting to know you session. It's near to the start of the summit. The summit opens, to give you a picture, with a video story, as we call it, where you have a video. In the last one, it was about COP26. That's going to be updated this time, so it's a video more up to date with the times. But getting students' reactions, and you start with a little activity to get to know, so everyone gets to know one another if they don't know one another yet, and starts to talk about some of the reasons why they're there. And that video is a catalyst for thinking about some of the themes as to why they're there. What are some of the emotions that bring them close to the climate issue? That follows with a keynote speakers session, which all schools from across Scotland and overseas join in with. And last time they heard from speakers from Fridays for Future, speakers from Mozambique itself, Red Crescent Red Cross head Martin van Alst, and speaker from Oxfam, and a couple of others as well. And then that leads into the getting to know you session, which I'm now going to talk about. Now, the getting to know you session was, I would say, the most positively received out of all activities by the pupils. It starts before the event, so pupils prepare some material, which they upload to Wakelet, which is about their school and their local area. So pupils have a chance within the first day of this summit to start to put themselves in the shoes of those in the schools elsewhere in the country, elsewhere in Scotland, but also elsewhere in the world. Looking at pictures, videos, sounds. We had some people doing incredibly creative things last time. We had some doing a kind of footage taken just by holding their phone up like this, and it's showing their journey to school, including walking into the building and up the stairs and into the first classroom they go to, which is just fantastic, because straight away you're in their shoes and you understand a little bit about their journey to school. There were also pictures. There were ones from Nepal where you had an example where pupils had to walk to school once, Janakalyan School in Nepal, by first going waist deep into a river. You can see all of them with their school bags and their jackets and everything, waist deep in a river. And this is a journey they made each morning at the time where that river was particularly flooded. So really kind of high impact material as well as part of this getting to know you session. And during the summit, there's a session for the young people to introduce themselves over Teams and have short discussions. So we had the Nepalese school, we had the schools in the Western Isles, and we had my school, Boroughmuir in Edinburgh, for the first kind of group. So we split everybody off into teams of 3 for the getting to know you. And pupils have a chance to prepare questions, which they then ask to pupils from, as I say, the other side of the world, and they get to return that. So that it's facilitated by the teachers. There's a structure to it, which is in our event guide, but pupils get to talk to one another directly, and that's really wonderful. During the summit, the young people also have an opportunity to look at some of the material produced by children from the other schools, as I say, to get to know them. This builds into, so the students find out about those climate problems that each school has. We had problem statements prepared by every school in advance of the summit. Our one was concerned with raising awareness, or other schools that raised issues to do with waste, issues to do with flooding in the future, based on modelling of sea level rise, and then more extreme things such as the flooding river that I spoke about in Nepal, and particularly bad waste management in the case of Mozambique, where there was waste being burnt at a dump in relatively close proximity to the school, causing respiratory issues with many of the kids. So this is a description, this problem statement, of the problem and preliminary ideas that they have, the kids, for taking action on that problem. And as I say, many issues were involved there, including insufficient plant cover in the school grounds as well. So issues to do with biodiversity were common as well. And the kids review the problems identified and presented by the other school groups. and they start brainstorming their own solutions, incorporating some of the good ideas that they've seen other people's come up with for their own problems and some of the preliminary ideas they've had themselves. So they've had a chance to talk about some of the solutions they might adopt and that they might pledge for in the summit. But they've not had a chance to see what else other people are doing. So giving them that global perspective that then leads to something more impactful. And then it finishes the Ideas Lab. There is another activity I have missed out, which is the country comparisons activity, which serves to give them a chance to critically think about some of the social and economic factors driving climate change as well on a global scale. So including things like connections between GDP, population, carbon footprint. So there's a bit of that involved, a bit of critical literacy involved before they start this Ideas Lab. But the final stage of the Ideas Lab, after you've had your problem session and your solution session, is your communications section. So pupils prepare artwork and communications. This can be anything. It can be a website, it can be a poster, it can be an idea for an app, a blueprint, a new plan of the local area. If they decide that what they want is something more wide-reaching than the school, linking into communities, we really, really welcome that, more than just within the confines of the school itself. So communications involved last time theatre performances in Mozambique, developing a board game in Tariff Academy in Aberdeenshire, producing an infographic of their planned actions. And that communication session, once those are all submitted, a panel of sustainability experts has a look at the outputs, the artistic outputs, and this panel session serves to provide support and encouragement and bolster the pupils' self-confidence in what they've come up with. So, and providing next steps as well. So what do the panel think would be a good next step for each school, but giving them a chance to think, actually, you know, we've really come up with something here, and what can they do with it next? They also try to take together and draw a thread between the different commitments made by different schools, different pupils in those schools. And so it's a great way to round off that section of the summit. After that, you've got a session to work on and set pledges, which the groups then sign, along with the teachers involved. And we're now working with a partner community group, Scottish Eco Clubs Unite. This wasn't the case last year, on an initiative called From Pledges to Project. So in other words, focusing in on those next steps. How are we going to link into the community with the help of what we're calling a community climate ally, so that the Eco Club, or whichever group of students are working on this problem, have help with the pledge that they take forward and a link into the community when doing so that there's a legacy to what they prepare and that it doesn't just end on at the end of the 3 days. That's crucial for us. Let's talk about what's involved for a teacher taking part in 1.5 Max, because no doubt that's something that you'll be wondering as well. Essentially, you let us know you're interested. There'll be a link to a Microsoft form, which we'll display at the end of this. Obtain support from your school's senior management, and receive confirmation once that's confirmed that your school is a participant. Just to state this now, because Howard and I are about to begin the process of formally sending out confirmation forms to schools we have decided we would like to be part of the summit from the selection that have registered interest. We'll be asking for you to complete the form as soon as you possibly can if you are interested. So in other words, by the end of tonight. If that's going to be impossible for you, please just let us know and we can extend the deadline for you. If you just let us know during this webinar once we get to the Q&A session. So we would like for people to join us for meetings in the run-up to the summit as well. So there is a commitment of a 1-hour weekly meeting after school on a Thursday, joining global, or it could be a Tuesday. We're actually still thinking about that a little bit. Joining global school preparation meetings, as we call them. Now, this will include the sort of training that you would hope to get in the run-up to an event like this, including climate change education, training in facilitation, how to facilitate empowering discussions with young people, because this is something that is not necessarily part of all our practice. I mean, I'm a maths teacher, and how often do I really get the kids to properly I've been trying to do it as much as possible, but, you know, getting the pupils to really take the lead on an activity and take it where they want to take it is something that in the slot of 50 minutes, in a maths lesson you don't get to do very often. And so we recognize that it's not necessarily part of everyone's day-to-day practice. So we'd like to give training on facilitating empowering discussions with young people to help you get the very best and your pupils get the very best out of this summit. We also want to give you a chance to be trained up in the use of the technological tools that we're using, such as Wakelet, which is where we store materials such as photos and videos for showcasing the work that your pupils do, reviewing the venue and the time available, and making sure that things are sorted out. So that's a 1-hour meeting once per week for 7 weeks. It says 8 there, but it's 7 weeks in the lead up to the summit, which takes place in the week beginning the 24th of October, on the Tuesday, the Wednesday, and the Thursday, so the 25th, 26th, 27th. During the summit, as I say, so you attended meetings in advance, and then you would be responsible for facilitating a 3-day workshop led by learners. But what we're going to ask is that it's not just you that's involved in the project. We strongly recommend bringing in a second teacher or people support assistant, somebody in the school who's prepared to help, so that you're not alone in this. You could potentially share a rota on those 7 weekly meetings and have help facilitating, potentially have help facilitating the 3-day summit as well. It's really important to have somebody else working with you within the school that you're in. There'll also be guidance that we provide on taking photos for the showcase and where to put those. And just remember, there will be support available for using the technology involved. We've tried to limit it as much as possible, given the fact that our schools in our African partner countries often do not have access to much more than a single mobile phone and some data. So we've tried to limit it to WhatsApp, Teams, and Wakelet. We will provide, as I mentioned earlier, a PDF event guide with details on facilitating all activities early on, so that you can familiarize yourself with that nice and early and have a sense of what it is you're going to be doing. Now, I don't believe there are any university or college students, further education students in this call, but for information, there are opportunities for students to be community climate allies, to experience leading a summit, coordinating pre-summit meetings and professional development for teachers. Myself and Howard are leading the 2 clusters that are involved. We'll talk about that in a second. But we are seeking for people to join us in helping coordinate these meetings. There are other roles such as promotional materials and graphics and preparing social media campaigns and blended learning resources, many other possibilities. So if you know any further education students or others who might be interested in that role, community climate allies, then please do get in touch with us. Our contact details will be on the final slide. Just a couple of pictures here to show you students actually working away in their workshops over the summit. Now, all the summit activities involve collaborative working, reaching agreements, and co-producing their outputs. Just to talk about the actual output of the summit, we feel the event was a success in at least 3 ways. The first being the general feedback that we had via surveys at the end of each day and informal comments from learners and teachers. They were overwhelmingly positive. You're talking about the survey, we had over 92% very positive feedback from pupils and from teachers. We're particularly proud of the comments we've had from the more disadvantaged groups from Nepal, Mozambique, and Malawi, and also more disadvantaged groups in Scotland in particular. A really prominent example for us is the Hospital Education Service pupils. So Liz Russell, who works there and who worked with those pupils who are essentially in bed, the whole time that school is running. They've got a kind of biodiversity group, but she said that they were, they're kids that in many cases feel cut off from society. She described them as some of the most vulnerable pupils in Scotland from her perspective. And she said taking part in the 1.5 Max Summit was transformational for them. It brought them out of their shells in a way that she hadn't seen before. And now they want to save the planet. They want to save the orangutan. They've become so engaged in these issues of climate and environment and planet in a way that's really taken her aback. And so we're very, very proud of that feedback. It appears with Nepal as well. Both these groups were inspired by the experience of being given time and respect to engage over an extended period on matters that were of utmost importance to them. And eco groups formed, as a result of this. In particular, in Northwest Community Campus in Dumfries and Galloway School in Nepal, there is now a new eco group as a result of this. Or in Musselburgh, you've got an eco group that went from 7 pupils up to 40 in the course of a few weeks of the start of term, which is wonderful. The actual action by the participating school children has been given a boost, as I say, and I'm also talking about pledges in particular. So Northwest Community Campus, what I find amazing is that the school pupils there actually did something that as teachers, we wanted to see happen for ages. They rewrote the school improvement plan to include learning for sustainability. And this is something that in my school, Boroughmuir, I would love to do that. It's just about finding the time in many cases and being able to convince people to do so. But when the young people take something on, that's when it tends to actually happen. We wanted to get an interdisciplinary learning unit set up in Boroughmuir for Climate Change Awareness Week, as we called it. The pupils made some initial proposals, handed it over to the leaders, and then it happened. They pledged it and it happened. That's what's really wonderful about this, is that in many cases you will find that the pupils' resolve and motivation to act will really surprise you, and even if it doesn't surprise you, it can produce some really good results, is the point, within schools and within communities. And we're very, very proud of the pledges that people have come up with. Right, enough of me nattering on. I'm going to hand back to Howard, who's going to talk a little bit about the structures of 1.5 Max in 2022.
Thanks very much, Tom. Just a couple of points that struck me as you were talking there. We've been talking about equity, diversity, and inclusion. These are core principles by which we, as an organization, work, and we are setting up 1.5 Max with those principles in the front of our minds. And to achieve that, we're setting up an event which has got a very low barrier to entry. So Tom actually referenced schools who almost have nothing. They have, may not even have 2 laptops. We purchased laptops for the Mozambique schools, but other than that, they operated very effectively and reported that they got an enormous amount from it. And it's obvious from having seen what they produced that they achieved an enormous amount with very little by way of resource and technology. And that was a point that Laxmi Prasad Pengani, who won the International School Award in Nepal, was complimented on, was the level of achievement given the limited resources available. One of the, Tom also made reference to involving students and others from the community. That's an important part of what we're trying to do here. The scale of 1.5 Max is quite small, and we're looking to find the means to scale up. And there's 2 key ideas that we've got in there. One is to break the event into clusters that can be run separately and be run by separate organizing groups. So we're looking to avoid becoming just a centralized group that has to provide all the resource to run the event. We're now breaking it into 2 clusters, and that's what's going to happen in the 1.5 Max 2022 event. And the other aspect is we're involving, as far as possible, others who are really interested in being active in the space, connecting to young people and taking action. I would just say that students at university, I think they almost everyone that I've spoken to becomes involved with this because of their wish to connect to their own values. So many of the students that we're working with are training or studying sustainable development, but that in itself is for most people insufficient. They are looking for ways to be able to take action and to do things cooperatively and move things forward. So we are looking to expand the 1.5 Max organizing team, and in 2 ways, one with students and community organizers, but also expanding to connect to local coordinating centers. So we're working now with the Scotland-Malawi Partnership in Malawi, I'm hoping that we're going to be able to do something similar in Nepal and in Cape Town. There's a group that we're connecting to. So we're looking to be able to expand just beyond a Scottish-based group. So to just reflect what's on this slide, 1.5 Max 2022 will be run in very much with the same aims and approach as we adopted for 2021. On this occasion, we're moving from a single cluster to 2 clusters. This time, one of the clusters will be a Scotland-Africa cluster, and the other will be a South Asian cluster. And the reason that we're doing that is to be able to operate on 2 timelines to involve schools from Nepal, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and the Maldives. It's an ambitious objective, but to ask them to operate on Scottish time would just be too much. So we will be running that event on the time which is basically Scottish time plus 4 hours. And this year, COP27 is going to be held in Egypt, and it is expected that the focus will be much more on issues that never really saw the light of day in COP26, the issues of equity, of finance, and the issues of greatest concern to the poorest countries. So that's really a run through of the way in which we're moving to 1.5 Max 2022. It's going to be run in October, possibly in the first week of November for the South Asian cluster. And we are looking to focus more on the threads which we think will be important areas of discussion in COP27. So with that, I'm going to stop and ask if there's any questions or thoughts. I would say at the moment, Tom has indicated that we have a few schools already that we believe will be participating as part of the Africa Scotland group, but we're looking for more schools in the next few weeks to finalize the set of schools who will participate.
Maybe I could start by asking you a question, Howard, just to kind of, while people are thinking of any questions they have.
Sure.
Where did the idea for 1.5 Max come from?
Developed really, a real prompt for me was I had become more and more concerned about 1.5 degrees, and we were speaking about 1.5 degrees as being the point of focus for events. And we really wanted from the beginning for it to be a global event. During the pandemic, it was obvious that it was going to have to incorporate virtual blended learning and blended engagement. So as soon as that was being considered, the idea of making it available to countries and schools outside of Scotland was fairly obvious. I did come across an event that was put on a couple of years ago after the Paris Agreement that highlighted 1.5, not just in terms of the carbon budget, which is where most of the attention has gone, and all the net zero points of focus, but at that event, I heard Martin van Alst, who's head of Red Cross Red Crescent research, and he focused in on the importance of understanding what the impacts around the world would be of going to 1.5 and beyond 1.5 degrees. So 1.5 is just the obvious point of focus. And I think, Tom, it was in one of our meetings together that we came up with the name 1.5 max.
Yeah, that's right. And the pandemic gave us some room to, gave us some room to think and connect with people who were in the similar boat to us during that time. Are there any questions that people have of those attending this?
Have the schools stayed in touch? Because I know we missed out on the summit last year, and we formed a connection with one of the schools in Nepal to try and do our own little connection. I wondered if the schools were still in touch with each other.
The answer to that is a definite yes. We've got a cluster WhatsApp group with with all the schools, including in Mozambique, Malawi, and Nepal, and the schools in Scotland, and we still communicate about with ideas and information about learning for sustainability. And actually, we recently met in person as a result of that WhatsApp group, the teachers in the Western Isles, because they were coming for an event in Dynamic Earth, and we went to speak to them about how their pledge work was going. We met some of their wonderful young people from the Youth Climate Action Group that they have there, some of whom are MSYPs and stuff. And we, and we might well be going to see them over in the Western Isles ourselves at some point. But yeah, no, the answer is we are in touch. We've got a great group there, and the key thing, which actually I haven't mentioned during this, is that one of the reasons the first summit was successful, we believe, is the relationship building between the teachers in the run-up. There was about 7 months of that. So we have kept that tenet as a crucial pillar of what we want to do. In those meetings in the run-up, there's plenty of a chance to get to know one another a bit, and about why we're here and what your priorities are and how things are in your school and your part of the world. And we will absolutely be keeping that element to make sure that that relationship building is there. But yes, they are. Now I'm interested, so you got in touch with, do you mean Laxmi and in Janakalian, or do you mean a different school in Nepal earlier?
Sorry, I'm actually, I'm now driving to pick up my little girl, and I'm not really wanting to go on the phone too much, but I think it was the Connecting Global Classrooms that put us in touch with the school, and I'm struggling to remember the name of it now, because it was just at the time of COP26, and we haven't stayed in touch. We kind of lost that, so I wondered.
Sorry, I was interrupted there by a tannoy announcement. There's apparently going to be a fire alarm in here. So I would be interested to know what that Nepal school is, actually, because we're, as I say, we're now trying to form a South Asian cluster. Can you hear me? A South Asian cluster, which will also operate 4 hours ahead. So, yeah, really interesting that you were also involved in the Connecting Classrooms program as well. Are there any further questions, or maybe Howard should answer them?
Yeah, I can follow up just to point back to the project that we're wanting to get started up, which is pledges to projects, and we're very conscious that teachers are under pressure in Scotland and everywhere. We're hoping to involve young people, students, and other community workers to assist with locally defined projects. So if a school decides that they want to take some action, whether it's something like ending single-use plastics, that's one which we know that community action is also happening around. So we do not think that this is purely going to be something that we set up, a pledge happens, and then you can hope people will carry on at the same level, because it is a lot of work, and that's one of the main reasons that we're bringing in people, young people, students from college, people in the community, we're wanting to involve others who are wanting to volunteer their time with activities that'll make a difference. So we've managed to keep these relationships going, but we're also wanting to extend with additional support for the projects.
Any other questions there, folks? I think the most important thing I can do right now, and actually share my screen, is share with you the form that we've prepared for registering interest. So if this is something, I know that you're both from, I think you're both from Dumfries and Galloway, from what I understand. Let me show you the, just go into the presentation. Here we go. So there is a form, I'll go back down there. There is a form, it's at this link, which you can use to sign up, register interest. As I say, the second stage will be confirming participation, and we'll be approaching schools that we have shortlisted very, very shortly. So in other words, tomorrow, me and Howard are going to sit down. Tomorrow morning, Howard and I are sitting down and looking at the registered interest form, because this is the last of the webinars. So are either of you going to really struggle? I mean, this is a very short form, I would say, but are either of you likely to struggle to be able to fill this out before tomorrow morning, essentially? Is anyone definitely going to need an extension for that?
Tom, that assumes that the attendees are both planning to register interest. Of course, we welcome interest being expressed, but if you are wanting to register interest, please let us know, so that and if you can do it immediately, that's great, and if you need additional time, let us know and we can accommodate that.
No, of course, this is very much optional.
I'm going to register tonight. Should be all right. I'm not working, as I say, so if I need confirmation from senior management, I wouldn't have that, but my head teacher was keen on it last time, so I imagine it'll be fine.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Leah.
I'm one of 3 teachers at Dalbeattie High School, and the plan is for me to on Monday to feed back to them. I'm relatively new to the school, and I would have to speak to them really before I could go ahead with the registering the interest, as I'm not, although I'm very interested in climate change and as a geography teacher, I'm not actually part of the Eco Schools Committee, or that's not my remits at the moment. So I would have to speak to them first, but I imagine that we will. I can't see why we wouldn't, but it's just a case of getting the okay from them and seeing how we could go forward that way.
Of course. Okay, so you would need a bit more time then before you could confirm whether or not you had permission from senior management.
If that was possible, yes.
Of course. Now, I will just say the registering interest thing is a kind of preliminary thing, but then the confirming participation stage is when we would be asking whether or not you have permission acquired from senior management. So this form that you got here, displayed by this QR code, does not ask you whether or not you've got permission from senior management. It just seeks to know whether you are interested in taking part.
Right.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
Perfect. Am I right to take these QR codes down? The link is also in the.
I can't currently do it because I'm driving, but if I can access this later, I can do it.
Of course. No, listen. The form link is in the email I sent out anyway. Did you receive that, Leah?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
No bother. I'll take this down just now then. Okay. Okay, we're coming to the end of the hour. Are there any other questions that either of you have?
No.
Okay. Thank you very much, both of you, for your time, for attending. And yeah, if you are planning on registering interest, we really look forward to seeing your responses to that. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.